It's time for the college football playoff. Did the committee get it right?
We finally reached the destination on the road to the college football playoff. So we're back on the big mountain to break it down for you.
Hey, welcome back to the mountain. I am JY. This is my good friend Steve. We just did recaps of the conference championship games. They are now in the books, and so we take our sights to bowl season and the college football playoff. So we want to talk about the college football playoff, talk about where teams are ranked, talk about what the seeding is, talk about the first round matchups, lots to talk about. We want to break it down for you guys. So let's just start with the college football rankings. And this is how the teams are ranked. We're going to focus on the Big Ten and the Mountain West because that's what we do here on the mountain. So here at number one, they've been number one throughout the entire year. They've been number one on our power rankings throughout the whole year. You've got the Oregon Ducks. They win the Big Ten championship game against Penn State. I was anxious to see what would the committee do with Penn State? How far down would they knock them for that loss? Well, they really didn't knock them much at all. They are sitting here at fourth in the ranking. And then sitting at sixth is Ohio State, and eighth is Indiana. So the only conference that brings 4 teams into the CFP is the Big Ten, 1, 4, 6, and 8. Wow. So 4 teams in the top 8, let alone the top freaking 12 for crying out loud.
Good year for the Big Ten.
Fantastic. And then with the Mountain West, we've got Boise coming in at 9. They were sitting right there at that 10, 11, 12 for most of the year. But because SMU loses this game, they do get bumped up ahead of SMU in the final rankings, coming in the top 10, in the single digits at number 9 for Boise State. So, Steve, what are your thoughts on some of these rankings?
Yeah, it doesn't really surprise me at all. I think they did a good job with this. Obviously, Oregon, like you said, they deserve the number 1 spot. They've been number 1 all year. The only team, I think, in Division I to get through with no blemishes on their record. Yep. They beat all comers. They beat Boise earlier in the season. They beat Michigan. They beat Ohio State. They beat Penn State in the Big Ten championship game. They're a clear number 1. Doesn't surprise me. I picked the Big Ten, I'm sure you remember, to get 4 teams in the playoff. The top 3 teams, the Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, those were the 3 teams I said. And then one other team would get in. I really thought, Nebraska, Illinois, Rutgers. But I went back and watched that video, and at the end I threw in, and maybe even Indiana.
Right.
And you were like, oh, Indiana.
Yes.
I didn't even really think that was a real possibility. I was just throwing it out there as a maybe. And lo and behold, they're in there at 8. So I think they got it right. Like you said, Penn State none of the conference championship game losers really fell too much. Texas, I think, went from 2nd to 3rd. Penn State, I think, dropped 1 spot. They stayed ahead of Notre Dame and Ohio State. That was a question there.
Right.
SMU, I think, maybe dropped 1 or 2 spots. Not too far. So I think the committee, I think they wanted to... and they said that. The guys on the Ward Emanuel, the spokesman, said, we don't want to punish people for losing their conference championship game.
Right.
Especially now with I don't think any of the conferences have divisions anymore.
Yeah.
So it's the 2 best teams in the conference. And why punish them for going to the conference championship game? Because if you do, then you just set it up that maybe teams won't want to play in the conference championship game, or they get rid of them someday. So they didn't drop them. I will say... if I was doing this, I would actually probably put Boise ahead of Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame, they're a little inflated there. I know they're 11-1. They lost to a team that finished 7th place in the MAC.
Yeah.
Everyone beats up on Indiana on their strength of schedule, but Notre Dame didn't really have that strong of a schedule either. I probably would put Boise. I would probably move Boise up a few spots, 1 or 2 spots, and drop Notre Dame. I think probably about 4 spots, but. They lost their game early and they were on that march.
Yes.
So the committee just wasn't going to do that. But the important thing for Boise is they stayed ahead of the ACC champion. They stayed ahead of the Arizona State champion. The Arizona State, the Big 12 champion. Yep. So that was going to help them with their seeding, and there's a difference between rank and seeding. So Boise at 9 stays ahead of those, and it helps them with their seeding.
Well, let's get to the seeding next. Before we jump off, I just want to give a quick shout out to The Illini, they finished here at 20th, so a good showing for them. And UNLV, who lost their championship game, they did come in at 20th, so they do get knocked down a couple pegs here, but still in the top 25 at 24. So a great showing for UNLV. I was glad to see them certainly stay here in the top 25. So let's get now to the seedings, which is different, of course, than what you heard here with the rankings. Here are the seedings. Of course, you've got Oregon number 1. They're the number 1 ranked. They're going to get the number 1 seed. The number 2 rank also gets the number 2 seed, that being Georgia, the SEC champion. And this is where things now become a little bit more differentiated from the rankings, because the college or the conference champions get the bye.
The top four conference
champions. So your number 3 here is Boise State. They're the 3rd best conference champion, as they were ranked, as you just said, ahead of the ACC champion and ahead of the Big 12 champion. And then Arizona State is actually the 4 seed, because they are ranked ahead of Clemson, the ACC champion. So those are your top 4: Oregon, Georgia, Boise State, and Arizona State. Lots of noise, Steve, about the Boise, Arizona State thing happening. There was all kinds of stuff on X. Gloria Nevarez put something out. Of course, Yormark's been banging his drum for weeks now because he knew they were in trouble. It all didn't matter because SMU lost to Clemson. So let's talk about the rest of them. So sitting here is Clemson versus Texas in the first round. Then we have Tennessee versus Ohio State. A phenomenal first round matchup. 2 massive powers out of the Power 2 conferences, really number 3 out of each conference there. Then you've got SMU traveling to your Nittany Lions up in Happy Valley. And then Indiana versus Notre Dame. I find that very intriguing. I saw today the prices for that matchup in Notre Dame are crazy right now. Notre Dame fans are super excited. I'm sure Indiana fans are super excited. Fairly close in terms of geography compared to some of these other schools that have to travel, like SMU going to Happy Valley. Not quite as close. I wouldn't think an SMU contingent's traveling quite as well as what Indiana will travel to Notre Dame, but you never know. So that's your first round matchups, or all of your seedings, I should say. Did you have any surprises there, Steve?
I don't think so too much. And honestly, based on what the committee said, I expected Boise to stay ahead of the Big 12 champion, no matter who it was, because they've been ahead. Ever since BYU lost and dropped back, Boise's been ahead of that champion. So as long as Boise won and beat UNLV, I expected them to stay ahead. And again, I want to go back to, I know, like patting ourselves on the back a little bit. We were one of the first programs, podcasts to talk about Boise possibly getting a 4th seed. Everyone had just assumed they were going to be like 11th or 12th seed. But at the beginning of the season, we were talking about they were in contention for a 4th seed because of the weaknesses of the ACC and in the Big 12. And then once everyone accepted that, we started talking about maybe they even get the 3rd seed. And a lot of people thought that was preposterous, but here we are. I think they deserved it. They played their way in. And for Yormark in the Big 12, Big 12 is fun. I mean, it's there's some good football. It's fun, but they've made themselves into a league that's a bunch of 6-6, 7-5 teams, and if you can finish a couple games ahead of that, you can be the champion kind of thing. It's a very, there's a lot of parity in that league. There's not any, there's no beast of that league, at the top. So it is what it is. That's what your league is at this point. And honestly, I don't see the Big 12 that much ahead at the top. Top to bottom, they're good, but I don't see them that much ahead of a lot of the Group of 5 conferences. When you talk about the AAC, you talk about the Mountain West, I don't see them that far ahead, at least at the top of the contenders who are going to get into the college football playoffs. So that happened as I expected. And then, as far as the brackets and the path here, it did end up a little weird, I will say, for Oregon being the number 1 seed. They have one of the hardest journeys there. They got to face the winner of Ohio State, Tennessee, and Ohio State took them to the brink before. And if they win that, they're likely going to have to face Texas, who's been a top 5 team all year. So it's a little weird how it worked out, and I don't blame some of the SEC fans or whatever are trying to blame, Boise this or Boise that. This is the format that everybody agreed to. This was set up. It was agreed to. people were saying all season that there's a good chance that the 5 and 6 seed could have an easier draw than the 1st and 2nd seeds. Now, of course, like you've said a few times, you would take the bye all the time. Everybody's going to take a bye, and Oregon gets a bye, but all 4 of the top conference champions get a bye. And just the way things worked out, the number 1 seed, by winning the Big Ten championship game, they kind of lucked themselves into one of the harder draws. But
Right.
they're the top of the mountain right now. So if they, they should be able to run the table there, but it did work out. And I'll say my team, Penn State, they kind of lucked into an easier draw. I'm not trying to put down SMU or Boise in any way.
Right.
But when you see, playing SMU in the first round and then a Boise, that's different than playing, the winner of Tennessee, Ohio State, and then maybe Texas.
Right.
It's just a little bit of harder draw. So
Right.
it's kind of weird how it worked out. But I think the committee did a good job within the parameters that they were given and what was set up. The rules were set up.
Well, and the committee ranks, and I think and you wanted to be very clear when we did this episode where we looked at the rankings first, and then we looked at the seeding.
Yep.
The committee's ranking,
right?
And they're just going off of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, all the way to 25.
Yep.
They're ranking where they think they should be. They're not worried about these types of matchups. And I know people look at this and go, "Oh, this isn't the way it should be. We should be doing that." That's not. They're not seeding them.
Nope.
They're ranking them. And this is, like you said, and I said it on our episode that came out on Monday, I think they did a bang-up job. I think they got the correct 12, no doubt about it. If Bama wants to be upset, Bama can be upset. But as I said, they're a 3-loss team. They shouldn't be in this anyway. I do want to point out the conference champions. Obviously, we talked about 1 and 2. We know 1 and 2 being Oregon and Georgia. But then when you look at the other 3, remember 5, there's no auto. Forget this auto stuff.
Yeah.
There's the top 5 ranked conference champions. Could be from anywhere. Number 3 was ranked 9th. Number 4 was ranked 12th. And number 5 was ranked 16th. Yeah. I would say let's look at the 6th ranked, which was 22nd. They're not far off from Clemson.
Yep.
So for all these people that thinking, oh, it's the P4 is an auto bid, they're going to get in, auto this, auto that. That is not necessarily, and we see it perfectly here in year 1. This is the way it was set up, and to me, it's worked perfectly, and the seeding is what it is. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I think people get very confused between the rankings and the seedings. The committee's ranking teams, period. And then you plug them in wherever the heck they go, and this is what we all agree to.
Great points, and what you said, there's no conference that's locked into a spot. We saw it this year with the Mountain West. Next year, we may see it with the AAC.
Absolutely.
The American, they almost had that this year with Army and Tulane, and so it could be another conference next year.
For sure. So let's get to the first round matchup, Steve. I want to hear what you have to say about some of these. Of course, we just went over some of them, but you've got the 5 versus 12, Texas and Clemson playing each other. Then you've got the 6 versus 11, Penn State versus SMU. You've got the 7 versus the 10, Notre Dame versus Indiana. And then the biggie, in my opinion, 8 versus 9, Ohio State versus Tennessee. So what are your thoughts on this?
4 great matchups.
Yeah.
I'll start Friday night, the 20th, with Indiana traveling to South Bend to play Notre Dame.
Okay.
Fantastic game. I think both of these teams, I don't think they have something to prove, but I think they can prove something on the national stage.
Yeah.
Indiana has been doubted by the SEC this year and the SEC fans. And Notre Dame, they're not in a conference. They kind of can almost walk their way into this thing. So the winner of this, I think, will have proved something. And it's just a great matchup.
It is.
We're going to pick all the conference championship games and all the bowls. So I'm not going to make a pick tonight, but I love this matchup. Both teams can really make a statement there.
Yep.
And then next I'll go noon on Saturday. SMU traveling to my Nittany Lions. I will be there in Happy Valley and Beaver Stadium. Looking forward to a fantastic game. The weather right now, I think they're calling for mid-30s, but there's one of the weather models is showing snow. Okay. So we'll see. James Franklin's calling for a whiteout with 16 inches of snow. I don't know if we'll get that. But SMU, a team, they went through the SEC. They led the conference. ACC led the conference most of the season. They were towards the top. Yes, there's a close loss to Clemson in the championship game. They got a ton of speed. They're dangerous. Yep. Penn State, very good defense. Their only losses were, 1-score losses to Ohio State and Oregon. So I think this will be a great game. I look at this as SMU speed versus the kind of just the toughness and the physical play of Penn State, the running game and the defense of Penn State. And then next, like you mentioned, 4 p.m. And I want to say that game's on TNT. And well,
Right.
the next game, I'm looking forward to these games on TNT.
I agree.
Clemson at Texas. Clemson, you could say they snuck their way in. I say they played their way in.
Absolutely.
When they had a chance there. Texas has been high in the rankings all year, but they've now lost to Georgia twice. You look at their resume, they haven't necessarily beaten anybody. They had that big win against Michigan, but Michigan was kind of down this year. So I think this is really intriguing. Texas on paper should be better, but Clemson has some talent as well. They just went through a hard championship game to get in. Maybe they can pull the upset. We'll see. And then, like you said, the top game, 8 o'clock night game in the shoe, Tennessee at Ohio State. Tennessee has a fantastic, strong defense. I think they can match Ohio State in defense. They have the freshman quarterback, redshirt freshman, I think, quarterback Nico, really good quarterback. And Ohio State, they've been a top 5 team all year. They had a stumble, really not even a stumble. They lost a very close game to Oregon at the very beginning, but then they did have that stumble against their arch nemesis, Michigan. But that game, you kind of have to throw that out from any other matchup.
Right.
So to me, this is just a top team from the Big Ten against one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the SEC. I think it'll be a great game.
Yeah.
Really strong defense for Tennessee, really strong offense. I'm really interested to see the Ohio State offense, Jeremiah Smith, that high-flying offense. Can they score against Tennessee? Can they protect the quarterback? And then what kind of offense can Tennessee generate against a really good Ohio State defense? So a great way to, I think, the start and the end.
Yeah.
Just 2, I think, marquee matchups. Really excited, and I should be able to see both on TV, and I'll be in person to see this Penn State.
Well, there you go. What a weekend you're going to have.
Yeah.
And I'll be watching them all on TV. But, I'm excited. I don't have anything to add. I think you nailed that perfectly. I think it's bookended here by 2 terrific games. Nothing to take away from the Penn State game and the Texas game. But those bookended games, I think, should just be absolutely phenomenal games.
Agreed.
And as Steve said, we're going to pick all those games. We'll pick all the bowl games, all the CFP games. We do live broadcasts every week in which we will pick all of these games. We'd love to have you join us. Or if not, you can catch them after the fact. But we're going to be picking all these games. I have more to say, but I'm going to hold off for our pick episodes because a lot can happen between now and then. Hopefully everybody's healthy and we have some phenomenal football. So with that, hey, we thank you guys for watching this. Make sure you give this one a like and subscribe if you like our content. We'll see you all next time on the Big Mountain.